Hello, this is Jim Morentz. Welcome to today's XchangeCore and SABER combined webinar, where we're going to be introducing the project requested by Craig Fugate, Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, with the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology First Responder Group to improve and implement SABER. Today, we're going to begin by taking a look at SABER in the private sector, how it fits into FEMA's whole community, because that's really the basis for why we are doing this. And then, just a little while ago, I was notified by Rob Glenn that coming out of 2 weeks of 12-hour plus days, he has contracted some type of a throat thing and won't be able to participate, but we'll touch on that, and Rob will be participating at another time to talk about SABER and Hurricane Matthew. We'll take a look at information exchange and why it is the foundation for the public-private partnership, and that information exchange is where we'll bring together SABER, XchangeCore, and the whole community. And take a look at the multi-sector information exchange, because part of what we are doing is extending the capabilities of SABER. We'll take a look at the vision, next steps, and give a thank you to the innovators. So let's start out with the private sector. This idea was originated by FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate after his experience at local government, state government, and then federal government. The idea behind the whole community is that it's all levels of government, but also voluntary agencies, faith-based organizations, private sector, critical infrastructure, and citizens. And the idea is that you have to bring together all of these people for shared responsibility and to improve the collaboration among them, because that's the only way that we're going to end up with a community-oriented approach to sustainable and resilient communities. There were some very specific operational improvements that came out of the whole community. It was the creation of the Office of Disability Integration, clarification of the role of FEMA and the American Red Cross, and then for our purposes, the creation of the National Business Emergency Operations Center. And here's where Rob Glenn was going to speak a little bit about the NBEOC, Hurricane Matthew, and SABER, but we'll have him do that another time. But I do want to focus on one part of the NBEOC, and that is that the NBEOC is a very important, but nonetheless one of the constituents of SABER. We start at the bottom, FEMA's NBEOC, but also at the regional level, each FEMA region has a private sector liaison, some of whom have been incredibly important in developing SABER. But not just DHS FEMA, but on the right-hand side, other federal private sector offices. Very important. During Hurricane Matthew, Health and Human Services contacted us and say, how do I get this SABER information? All of the federal agency respond to that. On the left-hand side, we have our information providers. And I point out not just private sector companies, but multi-sector, because SABER originated in the commercial sector, but we have current projects that have grown over the last year or so with healthcare, utilities, the defense industries. So if you've heard about SABER and pigeonholed it as a retail organization, not true anymore. And that's what this project is going to be doing, is helping us extend beyond the sectors we're working with to all sectors. The right-hand side, I believe, is the broadest base constituency that we have. State Business Emergency Operations Centers, about 24 or 5 of those that exist today, natural constituents to SABER, and we've worked with several of them, particularly on the East Coast hurricane areas. Those that don't have BEOCs have in their State Emergency Operations Center a ESF 18 capability. Some states call it 19, depending on how they've structured it. But it's basically an emergency support function dedicated to managing either external affairs or the private sector, some combination of those. Then thirdly on the bottom, on the right-hand side, regional or city business emergency operations centers. Excellent presentation out at the Public-Private Partnership Conference in Colorado Springs a month or so ago by Cincinnati that has built a great BEOC. SABER also views those as our constituents. So now, how are we going to carry out this information exchange, and why is it the foundation for the public-private partnership? First of all, it comes right out of the whole community guidance, a whole community approach to emergency management, referenced down at the bottom. The first part of information is government, and this is a guide for governments on how to build the whole community, providing information to organizations ahead of time so they can prevent, mitigate, respond to all the threats and hazards. So that's the first flow from government to organizations. But the approach promises that in return, these private sector organizations will provide you, the government, with information on their status and, where available, their ability to assist government. For this reason, multi-directional information sharing, which we're engaging in right now, is one of the most important aspects of maintaining government partnerships with the private sector. SABER is an example of that. More specifically, to provide those for-profit organizations with ability to develop business continuity plans. And part of the project we're going to be talking about will provide for private companies business continuity plans that relate to SABER, with the whole purpose being the last bullet to keep businesses up and running after an event so we stabilize the community. SABER doesn't do all this, but it's a core component of providing status information and other assorted information and helping the business community get back into operation faster. And why is there a SABER? Well, it's got to have a gap that SABER fills. The gap is exemplified by the problem of the whole community organizing and exchanging the right data. As depicted here, it can be a nightmare. It's been quoted that there are 90,000 layers of geospatial data related to emergency management. We know there are dozens of geospatial formats. There are hundreds of non-geospatial incident management formats. Many different standards. Some of this data is available as web services, which means it should be easy, but many are not. But not only is there a problem of the volume and variety that needs to be discovered with little guidance at all, the problem is I need to know right here, right now, what's important to make this decision. And to bring government together with all the multiplicity of public and private organizations to get that answer is very difficult. That's why there is a SABER. Let's learn about XchangeCore and how all this fits into the portion of the whole community that SABER addresses. So let's start out by saying you can't tell the players without a program. SABER is an organization. XchangeCore is a technology and the public sector infrastructure status information. SABER was formed as a nonprofit by the private sector for the specific purpose of helping businesses provide status to government. The example is Target, Hurricane Matthew. Do you realize that there were more than 250 counties, innumerable cities, a handful of states, 3 FEMA regions, FEMA national headquarters, all of whom could be saying to Target, hey, is your store open or closed? When Target and all the other companies are trying to get back in business. The ability of SABER to make this process smooth, to reduce cost for government and effort for government, to reduce cost for the business and effort for the business of providing it, the government's consuming it, is the essence of SABER. So how do we do that? Well, that's XchangeCore. And XchangeCore is a technology. It was developed by the Department of Homeland Security, 2-year program to improve it by the Department of Defense and certify it for operational military networks. Now for the last couple of years that it has been a nonprofit, community-managed set of software, it's been greatly expanded by the private sector. So SABER, the organization, uses XchangeCore, the technology. The 18 critical infrastructure sectors represent the source of the status information. It's information about their own operations, and it's provided to SABER. But those same organizations are also the resources for restoration and recovery. Thus, informing governments through XchangeCore allows an exchange, a sharing of the private sector needs to get back in business and capabilities to help the whole community get back in business. So those are the three major components. An organization that uses a technology that interfaces with a constituency that includes critical infrastructure sectors and government. So how's this work? Let's look at the SABER concept of operations. We begin on the left-hand side. These are private sector operations. Create status. That picture happens to be Target's command center. Beautiful place. Other smaller organizations may be a card table with a laptop on it. SABER doesn't care because we provided multiple ways to get information about status into SABER. Beginning, middle on the left, our simple quick win spreadsheet. Everybody knows what a spreadsheet is. List of the columns are company names and addresses, latitude, longitude, whatever they open, close, whatever else they want to include. It is up to the company what they provide. They provide that to SABER. The SABER team, literally in a couple of hours, is able to conform that spreadsheet standard into something that can be uploaded to the SABER Space website. The company goes in, clicks on the member login, clicks on their name, clicks on the spreadsheet on their computer, and it uploads. That's the quick win. Another way is a fully automated connection. So far, only Walmart is doing this. So I can tell you whether there's a Walmart store that's closed in Dubuque right now because this is coming off of their business operations system. And got one other company that's talking about that right now. That's sort of the wave of the future, but not necessary. It's when it happens, when it becomes available for the company. Third way in the middle there, this company Spot On Response has an excellent relationship with SABER and has built a tool that allows a company to say, yes, here's my company name, I'm closed. And that quickly, a couple of touches on their phone, a store manager can report that to SABER, which can, as we'll see in a second, on the right-hand side, get reported out to lots of organizations. First of all, it can get reported back to the company itself. So the company then has a view on a map or in a list that says, these are the status of my companies. Secondly, in the upper right-hand corner, virtual business emergency operations centers. The 20-some that are out there have built nice little websites for their companies to be able to see status, to input status information. All that information goes directly into those virtual business emergency operations centers when authorized by joining SABER. Other applications, though, next one down on the right, incident management applications, WebEOC, eTeam, you name it, the ones that are out there, they can get SABER data. In the middle, common operating picture. This is an illustration of ArcGIS Online. By agreement, SABER will share to those common operating pictures. Next one down, mobile apps, not only ones that can provide information in, but when I get that location information that a store is closed, mobile apps can provide field verification. An employee can stand outside the store that has been closed and report back in text and pictures that the windows are broken, the awnings are down, or there's no real problem except that there are police keeping them from entering the block where that store is, and they could open the store if they were given permission by the police. So that ability to move SABER data out to the scene of the problem is why there's a two-way arrow there. That mobile app can then push information back through SABER to the company and to government agencies saying, here's more information about this business closure. Huge capability to really affect a two-way exchange of information. Bottom one on the right, mentioned before, SABER doesn't cost anything for the government to provide it, or to consume it, doesn't cost anything for the companies to provide it. Bottom right, key part of SABER is it doesn't cost. Doesn't cost anything for the business to provide the SABER information. Doesn't cost anything for government to obtain the business information. Doesn't even cost you anything for the software to connect to it, because you can download a free copy of Google Earth and become part of the information exchange. So now, this is as technical as we're going to get. A couple big pictures here. Under the covers, how XchangeCore Web Service Data Orchestration works for SABER. First, upper left-hand corner, applications provide data, whether incident management, geospatial applications, or maybe it's a flood gauge, or it's a dispatch system, it's business disruption, logistics. Lots of different types of data can come into XchangeCore. It gets translated and transformed by XchangeCore and becomes part of what we call common operational data. That is data that is about incidents, or about sensors, or about plans, or people, or tasks that are being done, geospatial information. All different types of things that add up to the information I need to manage an emergency. All in standard formats made possible through XchangeCore. That information then gets composed into content packages. I have an incident. Somebody says I'm sending that resource to the incident. That gets associated inside of XchangeCore. Somebody else says I have a sensor here that says the flood is going to be this high, and somebody else says I have geospatial information that says there are 10 schools within this area. All that gets put together inside of XchangeCore, associated into this content package. So the next time somebody comes in and says, what's happening? They know there's an incident with these schools, this flood zone, this sensor information, all together to be able to be consumed by the end-using applications. That's the beauty of XchangeCore. XchangeCore then also manages agreements between the providers of that information and the consumers, and when the rule is met, the agreement rule is met, a notification goes out to those approved applications so that we synchronize the content. No longer does anybody have to sit there and say, gee, this is 4 hours. Is there anything newer? XchangeCore takes care of that by providing a notification every time anything changes on XchangeCore. And that data goes out, notification data goes into a receiving application that does its job. It processes it, it visualizes it, people touch it, they say I'm going to draw this line around it, I'm going to take this school and say the school is no longer operating. Whatever they're doing to that data for their own purposes is improving the data, which then, as the arrow shows on the left, gets pushed back to XchangeCore. As that company, organization wants to share it, it gets pushed back to XchangeCore for a whole new cycle of new updated data. It gets transformed, becomes common formatted data, gets composed into a content package, and other people then see the data that you've wanted to provide. That's the technical process, the magic that takes place under the covers. So, after I do all that, what do I get? I'm going to get MultiSector Information Exchange. And as I mentioned, SABER started in the retail sector. Great case very recently, 2 weeks ago, where we see FEMA's National Business Emergency Operations Center dashboard. They consume SABER data. The little blue line over there in the bottom right-hand corner is a link telling other people, go to SABER, you can get this data yourself. Florida's Common Operational Picture, SABER data ingested there. Very sophisticated way. Some absolutely wonderful work being done down in Florida. Leaders in the whole use of geospatial information. But then the simple one, on the right-hand side, Google Earth. Same data that you see in both of those other ones. If you want a text view, you've got a reader. And you can just see the list of the things that are in SABER. A little bit of analysis. This is Internet Explorer, I believe. So I can see that there are 200 some Walgreens closed and a couple hundred Walmarts closed and some Targets closed. All of that The same information that I'm seeing all those other applications. The Spot On Response mobile app, here you see it integrated with the National Hurricane Center model for wind forecasts and direction. So you can see the interface between store outages and the impending hurricane. And then finally, the SABER map on saberspace.org, the status map. It's not where you want to go. It's there, you can see the stores, but you want to take the SABER data and put it into your application, into your common operating picture, into your dashboard, into your BEOC, virtual BEOC. That's what you want to do with the SABER data. So that's retail. That's where SABER began, but let's take a quick look at some other sectors. The defense industrial base, employee accountability, new project because you don't have business continuity if your employees can't show up to work. The Defense Industrial Base ISAC, Information Sharing and Analysis Center, is chartered, one of 16, 18 and other, chartered by the federal government to get information from federal threat and intelligence organizations and then transfer it to their members so that people get a knowledge of what's going on. And in Huntsville, Alabama, the Defense Industrial Base ISAC has a watch center looking out on what's happening. When there is a threat identified by them or provided to them by others, that goes into SABER. SABER information goes to the Company Operations Center so the company can begin to understand that threat, but also gets put out directly to the company employees so that they understand the threat, or they can then, most importantly, tell the company their status. An employee can say, I'm not coming to work. You need to find a replacement for me. I'll be to work, but it's the second shift. I can't do the first shift. Or perhaps, since I can see the location of the employees if they have turned on that capability, I've got 10 employees in this neighborhood who don't have transportation. And if I, as the company, can send a bus to them, I may be able to solve my understaffing problem by bringing my own employees in. And why is this so critical with the Defense Industrial Base? Because so many employees have to have a security clearance. I can't go to my rent and analyst company and say, send me somebody over here to analyze this communications traffic that's taking place in Iraq or someplace. I need highly secured people. When they don't get to work, there's lots of jeopardy. Another use for SABER. Healthcare preparedness and resiliency. This, our poster child, is the Community Clinic Association of Los Angeles County. 300 plus clinics. On the left-hand side, they do their emergency planning using this tool. They do floor plans. They do their emergency plans. They define what their capabilities are. But most importantly, when something happens, they provide their operating status. Whether they're open or they're closed or there's some type of special condition, they provide it to SABER. SABER immediately passes it to the Hospital Association of Southern California because of the integrated relationship between hospitals and clinics. Clinics go out of business, more people show up at the emergency rooms. A hospital goes out, more people are going to show up in clinics. The status exchange between the Hospital Association and the clinics, and the survey of capabilities that takes place, absolutely critical to maintaining healthcare resiliency. Two more capabilities coming in the future. The first one is patient awareness. They will get an access to the mobile app, have a clinic profile so they can choose clinics. They can see whether clinics are open and closed. They'll develop some loyalty to clinics, which are good business for the clinics themselves. And on the other side, Los Angeles County EMS ambulances can deliver patients to clinics in Los Angeles rather than just going to emergency rooms. Now, clinics will be able to communicate to ambulances their capacity to take on patients. Very, very good extension of collaboration in healthcare. Then a more traditional example, National Guard sharing with emergency management at all 46 counties all across South Carolina. Obviously in the recent hurricane, but previous efforts really an extraordinary example of the sharing that takes place in the sector of government exchange. And finally, the last of the quick illustrations that I'm going to show you is intelligence. New Jersey Homeland Security and Preparedness Office has intelligence analysts, and this is what the XchangeCore is doing. On the left-hand side, I've got people who are collecting suspicious activity reports from tips, from messages coming in, wherever we're getting suspicious activity reports. That's an isolated piece of information. On the right-hand side, you've got other part of the organization that have ArcGIS and have spent tons of time and effort identifying all the critical infrastructure in New Jersey and maintaining that information. Would a suspicious activity report have some relationship to critical infrastructure? You sure would think so, but not until now is that an easy process. Through XchangeCore, the suspicious activity report location bounces against ArcGIS, returns critical infrastructure information, and the analyst then has the two of them and can say, wow, this suspicious activity report is at the back fence of a chemical facility. Maybe that's important. Or this suspicious activity report is in the middle of the Pine Barrens and there's nothing down there. That's information exchange within another sector. I wanted to illustrate these sectors because the idea behind SABER is to be a support organization for multiple sectors. That vision expressed in the Science and Technology First Responder Group project is first to support the whole community, be that private sector interface to federal, state, and local governments. 2, build upon the SABER organization. It's been going on for 2.5 years. This is an accelerator, not something on which SABER will live or die. We are using this project to institutionalize business and critical infrastructure status reporting. Already doing it, but now it's our chance to reach out to business side and to the Business Emergency Operations Centers, the ESS 18s, to bring them into the planning and execution of a sustainable business and technology model. So that together we're going to support collaborative decision making between the private sector, all the levels of government, in order to get to the goal that everybody's seeking, and that's the speed community post-disaster restoration. The project lasts for 18 months, and there are some very specific things that we're going to be doing during those 18 months, which I view as an 18-month accelerator of a continuing SABER organization. So what are the tasks to be accomplished with this project? First of all, a major effort to coordinate the stakeholders to draw them into SABER. It's been done voluntarily. We have an organizing group that represents many of these sectors, but now we get to reach out to new sectors to have them as inputs for thinking on SABER. The second of these sort of organizational tasks is outreach to the national footprint organizations so that they use SABER in the cloud, and to the state BEOCs to use the regional and local connectivity to provide their local status. So both of these are building the memberships in the organization. The next are a set of technical tasks. The first one is to implement SABER in the cloud for the national footprint organizations, and then to establish regional connectivity to support the BEOCs and the state ESFs. And the third piece is to build some technical connectivity between SABER, sometimes government, sometimes commercial data sources. You saw earlier a list of lots and lots of different ways to get SABER data into SABER. Well, this gives us a little bit of funding to be able to say, you know what, that's an important technology that has lots of valuable information. Let's make certain that that can come into SABER. Or conversely, to say, hey, governments over here are looking for this. Let's make sure SABER can provide it. Let's take a look at this technical deployment here so you get a better picture of what it means. I'm going to refer to Big SABER. national footprint organizations. This is where Macy's and Walgreens and Walmart and all the others will be putting their information. In the cloud, supported by the SABER organization, just as it does today. There's no change there. That's the one level, national footprint. But there are business outages that are local. And we've got Kansas there. If we've got Lawrence, Kansas, there's a flood and there are 12 businesses that are affected by that flood. That's not a national issue. That's one that needs to be dealt with by little SABER, where in effect, those 6, 12, whatever number of organizations around that flood, report up to little SABER, which then shares locally, back to the state, back to the National Guard, back to the university, anybody who needs that information at a local level. So it's an up and back exchange that takes place for those states. Or even, as I have saw the presentation by the city of Cincinnati about their Business Emergency Operations Center, even at a city level. So whether it's a state, they're working at what we'll call little SABER. Little SABER, though, is powerful as big SABER and can operate through a region. And here we see Region 4, I think that's the HHS regions for Region 4. And little SABER can connect all of the business outage and status information across that entire region. So it's a matter of organizing it, not technical difference. Because, even though these are big SABER, little SABER, that's not something that's different. It's all SABER. It's all XchangeCore sitting there. And it begins with a single SABER XchangeCore implementation, physical device, with virtual SABER XchangeCores on that physical device that can satisfy a region or a state. So don't worry about the technology. Just be aware that it's there out in the cloud and you can reach it from your computer to be able to provide information and pull information back. So back to the tasks. Exercise. 4 different exercises are called out in the contract over the 18-month period. But know this, SABER is already operational. When Target woke up and said, we've got stores closed in South Florida, they didn't do anything except go to the SABER website, upload the stores that are out, and the state of Florida was able to pull that information off, and you saw it in their Business Emergency Operations Center Common Operating Picture. No human interaction necessary whatsoever. So SABER is always operational, has been for a while. These 4 exercises are much more about testing out concept of operations, how people are working together. And this next point, the content standards document. Task is to reach out to all these different sectors and come up with a mutually beneficial definition of what the information exchange is. And we'll talk about this in another minute. Last of the tasks are to do what we're doing and improve operations and continue to report that, build a concept of operations document so that we know how this will work, and to plan and implement a transition with 2 very important components, that is both a business and technological sustainment model. Because SABER existed before, operating on 0 to low budget, and it will exist after this project. The project is an accelerant to allow us to become a mature organization and deliver mature technologies. So with those as the tasks that will unfold over the next 18 months, what are the next steps? This is where you get involved. Join us. There will be 4 working groups that we need you to provide your expertise. These aren't working groups where I'm going to ask for 4 days to come to a meeting in Washington. Nah, doesn't happen. These are some documents that you'll review, and believe me, SABER writes short documents. These are telephone conversations that we'll have. This is you providing your advice in the most efficient way that you have to join this working group. The 4 working groups begin with the concept of operations. And that is so that everybody understands the SABER agreementless exchange. There are no agreements for SABER, and there will be no agreements for SABER. Nobody has to sign anything. There's a statement of expectations, and when someone participates in SABER, there are expectations on what you provide, and there are expectations on the data you consume and what you do with it. There is no expectation that there is a force restricting in any way the sharing of this information, because SABER is meant to share. So the concept of operations is implementing the agreementless exchange, how it works best for our private sector providers, how it works best for our government consumers, and how that extends to all levels of government and all the critical infrastructure sectors. Now there's one other consideration here in this operations, and that is a secure SABER. Technically, it's already done. XchangeCore and the movement of the data is all secure. It can operate in the secure.mil network. It has been approved for doing that. So no problem on the XchangeCore side. It's an organizational case, because we can build and operate a completely secure SABER. For an industry that may say we can only share secure information, but when somebody comes to me and says, I'd like to use SABER not to share, I have to ask them why they're participating. So we'll be taking a look at this. There's going to have to be a very good case why somebody can't share information with SABER. And that takes us to the second working group here, and that's the content standard. And I really wish I hadn't used the word standard, because it's not going to be pushed through a standard setting organization. We're not going to be enforcing this is a standard. What we're really looking for is the meaningful minimum for each sector. And if that meaningful minimum to give your status information has to be secure, well, then so be it. We'll consider that secure SABER. But the meaningful minimum is what we want to get at. And then there are 2 parts to that. The first one is we guarantee you can extend that meaningful minimum. Because right now we have organizations that are providing a lot of valuable information about their building, whether they have a generator, whether it's operating, whether there's a 24-hour pharmacy associated with it. I mean, valuable information. Is it past the meaningful minimum? Yes, I would say that. But they're doing that because they see that as valuable for them to provide to government. So we'll guarantee that extension. But there's also the other side of it. If you don't want to provide it all, I understand. So we happen to have one organization now that they send a spreadsheet with a latitude and longitude. That's it. And the assumption is that they have sent the spreadsheet, they have a facility there, and that facility is closed. But they don't even tell me that that facility is closed. They're just sending the latitude and longitude. And I'm completely satisfied with that, because they met maybe less than the minimum, but I would rather know that I can go to a map or go to a list, see the name that I've applied to that organization or the icon that's up there, click on it, and have it say closed. That is sufficient value in this meaningful minimum. So the next part of this content standard is to promulgate by example. We're going to need those who are members of this working group to be able to contact your friends. Let everybody know that this is what you're doing. Be able to get the word out about this standard that will allow us to grow SABER and provide information in a sufficiently coherent fashion that government agencies can easily make sense of it and get the benefit of the guaranteed extensions. Well, that promulgation by example takes us into the next working group, which is peer promotion. This is not a government project. This is a community project. The fact that we have this particular project doesn't influence the way in which we manage SABER. It improves the way we manage SABER, gives us support for being able to fill gaps in SABER. But the way SABER grows is through you. Peer promotion, and we want to be able to use that to encourage our participation by demonstrating participation, getting you all involved. We want you to be able to tell us, members of this working group, what are those sector associations that we can use to multiply our outreach, and where are those other growth opportunities that you see to have you reach out to your peers. When SABER goes to the utility sector and says SABER's here to help, utility sector says never heard of you. But when one of our good utility participants, San Jose Water, goes to other utilities, they say, yes sir, I understand, I'll learn about this SABER thing. And that's the way we're going to grow. So I need that working group. The final working group is on the value model, the transition plan and how we sustain this. Need people with good thought in how we get SABER to be able to continue operation, provide value to the community, and be able to do that in a very, very efficient way after this 18-month period ends. Because then we will go back to doing what we've been doing for the last 2 years, as operating effectively, providing continuous support for everybody who participates in SABER. Again, I view this 18 months as the accelerator and our opportunity to mature the whole organization and extend it into other sectors and other business organizations. I want to conclude by saying thank you to those who have provided the inspiration and guidance for SABER. Start with Brian Lowe of the Florida Division of Emergency Management, who had the foresight to look at XchangeCore, call me up and say, I got this problem getting information from companies so that we know whether they're open or closed. Do you think this XchangeCore thing could help? Out of the discussion with Brian, he introduced Jim Williams to the project, who was then with Walgreens, and Jim gave us the private sector position on it. And together the two of them hashed through what still is the basis behind SABER. Brian then brought in Phil Strauss, absolutely brilliant private sector liaison for FEMA in Region 4, who has a better grasp on government and industry than anybody I've encountered. Phil was able to bring in new companies. Phil was able to have us experiment with SABER information going into the Homeland Security Information Network to be able to show how that worked. And Phil was instrumental in drawing the attention of the National Business Emergency Operations Center to our efforts. Rachel Tovey, then of Walgreens, now at Walmart, instrumental in some of the first activities. John Mueller, you can go to the SABER Space website, and John did an absolutely wonderful 3-minute illustration of how he uses SABER. Brooke from Walmart got us linked up with the first live feeds that we've had to bring into SABER and helped us orchestrate that. Jeff Hahn from Boyd Gaming, first non-retail sector. And why is the gaming industry interested? Two things. After a disaster, gaming industry cashes more checks than anybody else, and they provide more rooms to out-of-state emergency responders coming in to support the local response. Integrated part of the whole community. David from Macy's, Jim from Sears, Rick from Lowe's, Gabe from Costco. These are the people who have hung with us for the last couple of years, providing comments, ideas, constantly delivering data when an exercise was needed. So to all of you, I say thank you, because we would not have gotten to this point without all of you. So with that, let me go back to this slide so you have the URL that says this is where You're going to go now to become part of this project. Low level of effort, 18 months, your expertise is what we need. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody tuning in today, and I look forward to all of your participation in the future. Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.